First off, I am not a floriculturist. I was simply inspired by a small piece of ephemera, a sticker, basically. I know I recently claimed to not be a floral painter, but since my collage videos sink like cement shoes, I have to do something with this stuff. Hi, I'm Irene, and I'm honest to gosh not bitter. So I don't know if you can tell, but my concept sketch really hippified that itty-bitty sticker. Yeah, sometimes I like to add a text element to my art. Makes it seem more like an illustration, right? Something you'd see on a t-shirt maybe, or perhaps hanging outside a garden shed. For this project, I chose Artist Loft Level 2 cold-pressed 140-pound cellulose watercolor paper. The paints are Holbein's Artist Gouache. I selected only a handful of colors: permanent white, ivory black, crimson, russet green, amarcork yellow, and elm green. Brushes are all from the Princeton brand, a 3/4 inch stroke from the Real Value series, and a couple of small flats and a round from the Select series. Those Select brushes have been in my collection for a while now, and I've come to the conclusion that I'm not impressed by them. One reason might be the fact that I bought only small sizes. Another might be the lightweight, unsubstantial feel of the handles. In any case, and for gouache in general, Princeton's Snap series is more to my liking. The thing is, after giving my first snaps to a relative, I have only a couple of large ones left, and this was a small brush project. So hippie is probably an outdated term, almost as much as the alternative, flower child. I don't consider myself a hippie, but I admire their advocacy for tolerance, love, and nonviolence. That said, outside of embracing a flexible personal grooming policy, I've never been a free spirit or bohemian, blowing wherever the wind takes me. I need roots, man. But there is also the aesthetic side, and I wanted to try and capture some of that visual hippie vibe, I guess. In the end, I think it was partially successful. I can see it because I'm looking for it. On the other hand, someone else might see nothing hippie about it. And that's fine. The labels aren't important anyway. Either you like it or you don't. Or you think it's weirdly compelling. Please choose weirdly compelling. Backyard squirrel update. In the previous video, I talked about the overturned mini picnic table squirrel feeder. Well, I've recently noticed there are small gouges along the edge of our big human-sized deck table. Look, I'm not saying our squirrel friends are working together to try and flip it as some sort of "what do we want? Mixed nuts. When do we want it? Now" message, but I'm not saying it. Flowers. I adore roses. Who doesn't? They're gorgeous and smell divine. But I've had a lifelong fondness for carnations, probably because it was my mother's favorite flower, or at least I think it was. It might have just been that that's what she got for Mother's Day. We never went to an actual florist shop. Are you kidding? That was for rich people. Anyway, I always associated carnations with my mom, and that's reinforced by old memories of supermarket shopping with her. At the end, while the cashier rang up the groceries, I'd peek over the edge of the counter and stare at the pretty floral bouquets, tempting customers to impulse buy. Because they weren't expensive roses or orchids, but rather budget-friendly carnations. That might be why some people see them as common or cheap flowers. Doesn't matter. Whenever I see carnation bouquets, it's an instant flashback to childhood. Of course, there was also Carnation Instant Breakfast, a powdered beverage mix that came in vanilla, strawberry, and chocolate flavors. You simply added milk. Growing up, we usually had a box of that stuff around since at that time I was very young and we actually received weekly milk deliveries. Yeah, that was a thing. Carnation Instant Breakfast has since been renamed to Carnation Breakfast Essentials. I assume the change was to emphasize its nutritional content. I just know that as a kid, I drank it because it was nearly as tasty as Nestle's Quick, now called Nesquik, which is a much sweeter mix altogether. This is bringing back memories of the rotary dial phone sitting on top of the massive phone directory full of numbers in the white and yellow pages. White was for residential listings and yellow was for businesses. You knew you were particularly bored if you flipped through the yellow pages and its graphic ads for entertainment. The phone book sat on top of the chest freezer along with the bread box, the condiment tray, and a big container that held seasonings and assorted packaged foods. Because there were no cupboards in our kitchen. I've talked about it before, so I won't go into the whole growing up in an old house thing. Look, I'm guilty of using the phrase, the good old days, on occasion. But then I wonder, why am I saying that? The old days were tough. I have no desire to return to the time when we played with sticks in the dirt driveway, hung laundry on a clothesline to dry, watched Brady Bunch reruns on a 19-inch black and white tube TV set, and walked 11 blocks to the public library to look up anything. That's just the way it was. Looking back now, I can say it. It sucked. If you're a painter, you're likely familiar with the term ugly stage. I don't know who originally coined it, but it's a concept I grasped pretty early in my painting journey. The ugly stage begins at the point where you're wondering, what in the world is going on here? It continues with, should I keep going and hope for a miracle? Then reaches its apex at, surely there's no coming back from this. After that, the whole thing turns around, getting better and better, until you realize you did it. You pulled off a miracle. Those are the happy endings. With the unhappy ones, you don't bother with terms like ugly stage. You just call it a learning experience and tear it into many little scraps to be used later for color testing. The ugly stage happens because, generally speaking, the painting process usually involves creating a base and building it up in layers. So, for a good while, you're seeing things that won't necessarily be visible in the final piece. Think of it as painting a human body, but starting with the skeleton, then adding organs and muscle tissue, and finishing with the skin and clothing. That's an extreme example, of course, but hopefully it conveys what I mean. The scientific classification for carnation is Dianthus caryophyllus. I actually never bothered to look it up until now for this video. I remember watching the 1986 French film Jean de Florette on VHS. It was part of my brother Al's collection. His recommendation was enough for me, so I watched it and loved it. Well, love might be too strong, because it's one of those stories, such as Mystic River, that makes me so angry. But the element that sticks out the most to me is Cesar and Ugoland's farm, because they grew carnations. Never mind, they were villains. I mean, carnations. No, this painting isn't of a carnation. I've actually no idea what it is. There was a very early episode of The Simpsons, The Crepes of Wrath, where Bart goes to France as an exchange student. He's forced to perform laborious farm work and generally treated horribly by two Frenchmen named Cesar and Ugoland. The whole thing tickled me. Jean de Florette was a popular movie in its time, with both audiences and critics. It also won a number of film industry awards. So it's not that obscure. It just feels like it is. Yeah, there were times when The Simpsons really got me. Like in the episode Cape Fear, when the family sang Gilbert and Sullivan tunes on their road trip. Not only that, but later on, Sideshow Bob performed HMS Pinafore at Bart before trying to kill him. Some would say that was being redundant, but as a GNS lover, I was thrilled. Although I was bummed that they didn't include the song from Ruddy Gore that's literally about a character known as Bad Bart. A missed opportunity, Matt Groening. For lunch, I had some leftover beef pot roast, care of producer Mike. I can prepare ground beef and chicken pieces, but I've always been intimidated by whole or large cuts of meat. So when he and I initially hooked up, one of the first questions I asked was, "Can you cook a pot roast?" Which was right before, "Have you spent time in prison?" He answered yes to one, no to the other, and we've been together for the past 15 years. I have to say, though, that one of my all-time favorite dishes, Japanese curry, is fantastic no matter what you add to it. You could chuck in beef, pork, chicken, fish, or tofu. Who knows, maybe even hard-boiled eggs or lima beans, and it would still rock. It's easy enough to make at home as long as you use the pre-made curry blocks. I often get the S&B brand golden curry. Fun fact, I never even knew about instant curry blocks while growing up with my Japanese mother. She made hers from scratch using curry powder from a tin. I actually didn't care for it because she always added so many potatoes. Of course, I now realize that was out of necessity, but at the time, I figured she was just being mean. My adult love for the dish has me wishing for a fast food Japanese curry chain here in the States where I can satisfy my craving with a quick pickup at the drive-thru. Yes, I'll have my usual, the double portion medium lava pork katsu with mushrooms, cheese, and corn, please. What? How many times do I have to tell you guys? No, no potatoes. That's right. Even in my fantasies, there are people trying to spoil my experience. In hindsight, I should have blended the background layers because those stark, dark strokes are distracting. So there you have it, my hippie art. I'm mostly pleased with the end result, especially the color choices, because that particular shade of green is sort of retro, yeah? A 1970s avocado green painting to match the 1970s avocado green desk mat. Would you believe that was unintended? I'm happy to share this arting session. Thanks so much for watching. It makes talking to myself in the studio feel less weird. Until next time, make love, not war, and peace out.